before I go into it, I've just got to say, home insurance in the state of Texas is truly the Wild West. So anyone care to take a guess as to how many home insurance companies there are in the state of Texas? A lot. A lot is over 140 home insurance companies in the state of Texas. So when I say it's the Wild West, it is the Wild West. Over 140 companies, they all can write things differently. So like Cindi said, I've done this a minute. I'm actually the third agent in my family. Like, I remember being in church. Of course, we're at a big church, and we're fourth row over on the right. That's where the Dunn family is. All four of us kids, mom and dad, right? And I remember the usher coming down. And when I think of home insurance, this is what comes to mind. I was a little kid, and my buddy Chris Shiren, his house was on fire. And I remember the usher coming down the aisle, tapping my dad on the shoulder and saying, "Hey, the Shiren's house is on fire." Okay? So when I'm working with a client, this is what I'm picturing. Mm-hmm. So we all got in our brown conversion van back in the day, because that's what we had. And we rolled out of church and rolled right up to the Shiren's house. Fire department's out there spraying the thing on fire. And this is what we're working with, right? This is people's home. Mm-hmm. Vast majority of people, show of hands, is your home your biggest asset?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. How much time did you spend choosing your home insurance?
Not much.
Right? Okay. So this is the biggest challenge we have in the industry, is that it is viewed as a commodity. And I get it. Like, all the commercials are all about price. But we've got to encourage people to slow down and make a good decision, because there's options. So let's go to the options. So understand, we do things a little different in my office. So we do slow down, and sometimes people push back, and they're not the right client for us, and that's fine. But we're going to slow down and take a look at it. All right. So biggest thing you'll notice, this is just a hypothetical kind of starter home here in the area. So we've got, this example is based off of $204,000, right? As you look at this, you've got good, better, best, price point per month, $106 all the way up to $213 a month. Why would I not just go with the cheapest?
That's what buyers, from my experience, just the people that I happen to work with,
mm-hmm.
closing cost,
mm-hmm.
coming to the table.
Yep.
They're trying to get by with the least amount of out-of-pocket they can possibly do. Many of them are USDA or VA, no money down, or all of those things, and they're looking for the best rate.
Yeah.
And so I think this would be helpful.
So this is, they're looking for that lowest closing cost, right?
Yes.
I see that too.
It.
So you'll, just shameless plug, you'll also see Rocket Professional at the top. I'm a weird cat in that I've got my insurance licenses. I've got my mortgage license. I also do retirement stuff, and I'm a chartered financial consultant. So I put on a lot of different hats as I work with clients. But that's something that I see a lot from the mortgage world, right? Mm-hmm. You want lowest closing costs.
Yep.
And that's a big thing you got to look at. But again, I encourage people to step back and say, this is my biggest asset, right? Do I really want to spend the least amount of money possible protecting my biggest asset? Maybe not. So let's pull back the veil, right? Mm-hmm. All three of these options are insuring the house at $204,000, right? So all the time you're like, I want an apples to apples comparison. It's next to impossible. Over 140 companies, every company has multiple policies. It's next to impossible. So when you pull back the veil and you look at the bells and whistles in here, let's go to your wear and tear on the roof question, right? All right. So you've got the good, better, best option. The wear and tear on the roof is going to be handled differently across all three of those options. Okay. So Sherry, your client that takes the cheapest possible to be able to have the lowest closing costs, and they take that good option. The second bullet there says actual cash value on roof. And that's something that you've got to pay attention to. So a lot of these cheap policies that people are buying are actual cash value on the roof. And what the heck does that mean?
I was just
wear and tear isn't going to get paid for.
Okay.
So, you get up there, typically in East Texas, a roof that's 10 to 15 years old, that's the granulose. When you look at it and you see the streaks on it, that's called granulose. That's wear and tear. That's just good old hot Texas summers, a lot of East Texas rain. That's not storm damage. That's not getting paid for by insurance. However, that roof has wear and tear, and you've got the better policy, or the best policy here, which has replacement costs on roof. You get a hailstorm on June 1st. We're on the hook for it. Whole roof has hail damage. We don't care how much wear and tear it has. We are going to pay to replace that roof.
So actual cash value, That is, you're looking at this roof and say, it's only worth $5,000 now.
There's
So
a table.
it's-
Yeah, there's a
okay.
table that the claims adjuster is going to use.
So it's the value of the roof as it sits on the house right then.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So it might cost $20,000 to put a new roof on there, but if that thing's 15 years old,
It's only
the
worth.
check you're going to get might be $10,000 less your deductible. You may end up getting a check for $7,000
Okay.
instead of somebody who chose the better or best option. All right, we'll get that full $20,000, obviously less your deductible, so $17,000 check instead of $7,000.
Okay.
But the person that took that good option saved $50 a month, right?
That's right.
So you know you got to pay attention to stuff like that. Great question.
Good point.
Does that help out?
Mm-hmm.
Solar panels gonna fall under a similar type deal, except they are, and this is gonna vary by company. So you want to ask with that, but typically they're gonna be since they are attached to the house, they're gonna be viewed as part of the structure. And it gets tricky too because there is some shingles now that are actually solar paneled, and so there are some varieties there. I would really dig into what that company's policy is on the solar panels. But that's a great question. Perfect. So anyways, different bells and whistles, right? So you guys can see there's a big difference. Some of the things that I would highly encourage you guys to look at is covering water damage. Most people think number one claim is what? What's the biggest reasons that turn in a claim? Who said leak? Winter. All right. Water damage is actually the number one cause for a claim. Number one
Burst
cause for a claim.
pipes, that kind of thing.
Burst pipes. Yep. And so again, the good, better, best. Is it covered or not? It depends. So a lot of people who experienced snowvid, who was in Texas,
Mhm.
right? How many people had frozen pipes? So a lot of the good options, a lot of the cheap policies in Texas did not cover freezing. And so people had busted pipes because they froze and busted and they were not covered. Most of the time though, you're sudden and accidental. So if you just have something burst, like a hot water tank happened to a customer this week, that kind of deal is going to be covered. We're going to cover the damage. We don't cover the plumbing. But that's going to be covered. But what if it's a slow leak? Okay. Your option for good, if you'll follow on down, your option for good, that is not going to be covered if you got something there. So that is another place that I would encourage people to spend money, is making sure that you have proper coverage for water damage. It's the number one claim.
Which one of these policies do you sell?
Me personally, I have the better one. So I personally choose the better package
The better.
for my own home.
Okay. But do you actually sell the good, better, and best policy?
These are all three options.
I
Yep.
gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
Perfect.
And you can customize these. We do this just to illustrate the range of options that are there.
I'm
And
sitting
so-
here wondering which policy do we
Yeah.
have? That's exactly what I'm
Yeah,
thinking.
right?
Yeah.
Where am I? I'm an insurance guy, right? I'm a little odd in that I don't want to give State Farm all my money.
Take a
I'm
little
also, I take off, do what?
Take a little risk
Yes,
on yourself. Yeah.
correct. So you got to understand who is taking the risk.
Mhm.
And when you pay more money, you are paying State Farm more money to take more risk. And so I'm a big fan. I'm a personal finance guy. Like I said, I'm a chartered financial consultant. And so I'm a big personal finance guy. And I highly encourage people to have a good emergency fund.
Does State Farm offer pack discounts? So if somebody has their auto insurance with
100%.
Geico
Oh.
or just
I'll let
another
you finish.
company,
Okay.
and they write their home insurance, they're going to buy a house.
Mhm.
Do they get any sort of discount? I just bought a house and
Mhm.
I got a 15% discount across the board
Mhm.
for writing it all together. Does State Farm?
Yes.
Okay, so if I move auto and home to you.
Yep.
Okay.
That's the biggest discount.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. You got it. So, yeah, do your car and home together. Vast majority of companies these days bundle.
Mhm.
And so they're going to do that.
Okay.
Yep. That's the biggest discount. So I go with the better option, and I go with a higher deductible. So I have a 2% deductible on my house instead of a 1%. And so the small stuff I'm going to pay for. And so we talk about this aggravations versus devastations, right? The small stuff that just sucks, a rock that goes through your window, you replace the window. You don't turn in a claim. But the hot water tank that explodes, right? And I have flooring, ceilings, furniture that's damaged, right? I want to turn in a claim for that and have State Farm shoulder that. Great question.
Like an average time frame that it takes for your adjusters to go out and assess damages?
Some of that's situational. So it depends on the severity of the claim. And so if it's a house fire, we've got somebody there that day typically. And especially like house fire, I'm actually there that day. We're as far as I know, we're the only company where I can cut a check myself for up to 10 grand right there on the spot. So if somebody has a house fire, yeah, somebody's going to be there that day. Hail damage from a storm or something like that. It depends on how many are in the area, right? Yeah. And so it depends on severity there. These last storms that came through, right, in Azalea, where trees were blown into homes. If it didn't, puncture or take down a wall or something like that, they probably got, pushed back 3, 4, 5 days. But if it's, the house on Blue Bonnet, oh my gosh, my wife and I love it. Just got smashed, right? We're going to have somebody there probably that next day. Yeah, great question. Things to consider. These are just kind of my thoughts. I also bounced this off a couple realtor friends and was like, all right, what kind of things should I touch on? One is, how much should I insure my house for? Realtors, what's the value of the house? What are we always talking about in the real estate world?
What it costs to maybe rebuild.
Okay. I was gonna argue, you guys always talk about what you can sell it for.
Comparable.
Yeah, what you can sell it for. And depends on the market. Sometimes what you can sell it for is equal to what you can rebuild it for. Oftentimes they're different numbers. And we're seeing that especially now, like in Dallas, for example, right? Where they're selling homes for $300 a square foot, right? It costs less to rebuild that home than they can sell it. And so having a good conversation there, because oftentimes clients don't understand, I just bought the home for $250,000. Why are you wanting to insure it for $300,000?
Is that a choice that somebody has to make when they buy? I mean, if I call you for home insurance, are you going to ask me, do you want market value or replacement, or do you just offer one or the other?
We educate on it. And then honestly, the lender drives a lot of that.
Okay.
Yeah, the lender drives a lot of that because your bank is typically going to require you to at least cover that loan.
Okay.
And there are a good chunk of people that just don't put much down. Kind of
Okay.
like to your point, right? Going through a USDA loan or something.
Right. Okay.
Good question. So understanding the difference between market value, highly encourage on insurance to put it at replacement cost. About the only time I don't is if I'm working with an investor. All right, an investor who has lots of rental properties. They're really looking to just insure their investment. And so we'll have a conversation with an investor at that point about, would you rebuild this home here, right? If somebody's buying a lot of rental properties around UT Tyler because their target market is college students,
Right.
they may want to rebuild that house right there next to UT Tyler, right? So that home we would insure at replacement cost. However, somebody who, I don't know, isn't building based off of geography, they may just want to, I just insured a rental property down in Troop. That gentleman just wants to have it insured at his investment in the property. Does that make sense? So we'll do two different. So you can flip flop. Great question. I already hit what kind of water damage is covered. Please pay attention to the bells and whistles, because that's not really going to be those main numbers when you're looking at how much insurance I have. It's not one of the big numbers there. So ask your insurance company when you're buying a policy, what if my pipe busts? What if it busts from freezing? And yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you offer different policies for a home buyer versus a rental property?
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. There's two different needs there, right? The home buyer has all their stuff in there, and so there's some different bells and whistles built into a policy based off of that need, versus a landlord, right? More than likely, they may have a washer dryer, but not a whole lot else. And so they're written a little bit differently there as well. Our policy also includes for the landlord, like loss of rent, right? If a big old tree falls on the house, tenants can't live there for a few months while it's being repaired, then that landlord would get paid loss of rent as well. So there's some little differences. Good question. Overflowing toilet. Nobody wants to have that in their house. Going back to my realtor, if it's from your buyer who's using the John at every showing, right? And it backs up from that, that's going to be covered underneath the vast majority of homeowners policies. The tricky part is, and this happened down in Rust not too long ago, the city sewage had issues, and it is absolutely filthy when this happens, but if the city system backs up into your house, that's covered under what's called backup of sewer and drain. and that is not standard in policies. So again, that is
The best.
an option. Yep. So you'll see that on the best package. That's an option that you can add there. Now you can also add that on other places, but that is not.
So I had a house one time where painters were painting the house before the people moved in after they closed. Then they went out and they poured the paint into the French drain to clean their buckets. It stopped it all up the next time. Big rain, this is
no.
before the people moved in, flooded the house. It was not covered.
That's my next
so
one.
Think about that.
Flooding.
It's not covered. Rising water.
That would be rising groundwater in that situation.
Yeah.
Yep. So flooding not covered under any home insurance policy out there. Absolutely zero home insurance is going to cover that. You have to get a standalone flood insurance policy.
Sure.
It is super cheap as long as you're not in a floodplain.
Yeah.
Super cheap. So if you're, if that's something that keeps you up at night at all, if there is construction going on in your neighborhood, it changes the flow of drain water. And I have seen, especially, I'm born and raised again in Oklahoma City. That's where I started in insurance. And there were lots of new homes being built on the edges of town, right? New developments. And we saw that happen. You'd have a 100-year flood and you'll see a block of houses that are not in a flood zone get flooded. So something to be thoughtful of, mindful of, even if you're working with a client, you're not in a flood zone, right? You're at a high point, you think, until you have a monster rain out here in East Texas and stormwater does not drain appropriately. This is why I go back to you've got to slow down at some point. This is your biggest asset. And encourage your customers. I know things are crazy right now. You're moving, you're trying. The mortgage broker's asking for all these documents, right? Slow down though, right?
Mm-hmm.
Slow down. Don't just look at the big numbers, asking questions whenever you're getting bids for your home insurance. So
What are the best questions to ask?
I would take this things to consider, or the bells and whistles right here, and just ask some of these questions. Are these covered on my policy, right? What happens if I have water loss from this or that? How is my roof covered? I have hail damage. And then a leaky shower pan. It's happened to me at two homes, 2 times to me. That is not fun.
Is it covered anywhere?
So that is my wife loves this phrase. Leakage and seepage is the terminology in the industry, but some companies will call it a water damage endorsement. But that's what covers a slow leak.
Okay.
Yep. And so that is on better and best. And I do have that on my own policy because that's one of those you don't know, a leaky shower pan or a pipe behind your shower that's has a slow leak. That can do some major damage. And so both situations, my
Shawn,
starter.
In other words, that's actually the name of it?
So I'm going to send it out like this. And
Okay.
this is something that my office we've created.
Let's talk about that a second. Okay.
Mhm.
In a condo, somebody.
That's the thing. That's
is
what
the
I
thing.
fear is
Yeah.
that they're gonna forget they got the bathroom.
toilet ring leaks
Yeah.
and it leaks and it takes days for you to figure out that
Mhm.
water running down that wall is from somebody's
Mhm.
toilet.
Gets really sticky
Yeah.
because typically you're dealing with insurance company A, B, C, maybe even D.
Yeah.
And
You know
so
what
it
I
gets
keep
really
being
sticky.
told though is that it has to be from
Negligence.
Negligence, yeah.
Yep.
But if it's somebody's toilet and they didn't know about it,
Right.
you're out of luck. You have to claim it on your own insurance. They're not going to pay for it.
So liability is what would stem from there, and that's also one of the difference in good, better, best, right? So in that situation, if you do damage to 4 or 5 other condos or apartments, whatever, in your building, that liability portion, think about the person that left a candle burning and it caught the drape on fire. That negligence would stem under liability. And so whoever apartment it was or condo it was should take care of everybody else's, but it's going to be up to a maximum.
So if we don't have an agent, if we bought insurance to a company,
Mm-hmm.
can we send it? So there's nobody to call and say, I'd like to review my policy. Can we send it to you and you'll review it and tell us which one of these we need?
Would be happy to.
Okay.
And then you switch to State Farms.
Absolutely.
Would be happy to. You're getting to my pitch at the end. I appreciate that. Thank you. Let's see. Other questions I have. How many of you are dealing with people that are looking to VRBO or Airbnb their house?
We do that.
You guys have some of that? Okay. So that's something to ask questions about, because if you don't have a certain rider or endorsement on your policy, if you're renting it out, like our policy at State Farm is 30 days. And so if you're renting it out for more than 30 days in a given 12-month period, there's no coverage if something happens while that's being done. Again, I've done personal finance now for 12 years. And I have, thank God, only seen this 2 or 3 times, but that's too many. Dealing with widows, or especially during COVID, people that got sick and didn't have that emergency fund that I speak of, right? And so again, this is your biggest asset. This is your home. Please spend time and make sure that you are covered if you are sick or injured and you can't pay your mortgage, right? You still want to stay in your house. Is there a place you can go to pay your mortgage? We have obviously policies that can do that. And then the saddest thing, and I've seen this only 2 or 3 times since being here in Tyler, but the loss of a spouse, and it puts the surviving spouse in a tough spot. And so asking you the question, do I have enough life insurance in place that's going to allow me to stay in this house? Or sometimes that family wants to move out, right? The wife and kids just need a fresh start. Are they going to have that option? And so when it comes to life insurance, that's what it is for me, is giving your family the option on the worst day of their life to be able to do what they need to do to recover. So again, don't check the box on your benefits at work and real estate. We probably don't have benefits at work that cover this stuff. Please sit down with somebody. And so I would highly encourage you guys, as well as your clients, use a local agent that I'm thank you for Cindy's plug, but takes the time to slow down, ask questions, present options, and doesn't just give you the cheapest thing to be able to make that mortgage. So look for a local agent. I would love to be that for you guys if I can. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Yep.